And Joe Biden, unfortunately, can't really do anything in office, so he's got to use the same means as somebody who's just trying to have a quick slip and fall and make money. And that is frankly what we're seeing right now. This is exactly a Biden show because he's got to distract the American people. Listen,
but the Biden administration is not responsible for this trial.
How can you say the Biden administration is not responsible for this trial?
It's a state trial. It's Alvin Bragg. Whether you think there's a political motive for him, it's not connected to the DOJ. I mean,
Shannon,
the feds passed on these election charges.
Shannon, you should look at how many logs they have of state officials, Letitia James, Fannie Willis, visiting the White House, and then tell me that this is not a Biden trial. I don't care.
The feds pass on this case is the point I'm
You're
making.
Right. The feds pass on this case. Also, DA Cy Vance passed on this case. And
years
frankly,
ago, and then it came back.
And Bragg passed on this case. You know when it came back? When he decided to run for office. Mm-hmm. So tell me how that's not an indication that Joe Biden, who just sent his campaign down here with Robert De Niro yesterday, isn't a part of this. Frankly, any question that we had of that was squashed yesterday. And if you have even more concerns about whether he's involved in this, look at the fact that he is publicizing, literally publicizing for tonight to have a speech if a verdict comes out. That's a sad state of affairs. Meanwhile, our country is falling apart. He's got bigger fish to fry.
Do you not think, though, that any president would want to weigh in on something that's this historic, a former president, his predecessor, whatever the verdict or decision may be?
I wish that Biden had that same sentiment about the border, fentanyl, and our children being mutilated. I would prefer that he would focus on the real things instead of trying to attack his political opponent, who he just cannot beat.
Well, we'll see what the jury does and how quickly they do it. Alina, thanks for stopping by.
When even Fox News is pushing back on your desperate right-wing talking points, you might have lost the plot. Here, Fox's Shannon Bream explains to Alina Habba, whose previous legal work before Donald Trump includes representing a parking garage, that no matter how many times she insists that Joe Biden is responsible for this prosecution, not only is she wrong, not only is it Alvin Bragg's prosecution, but Joe Biden's DOJ actually passed on it. The DOJ actually could have prosecuted this case, but opted not to. Which, by the way, goes to show that you should never extend goodwill to Republicans. The Justice Department, for whatever reason, opted not to prosecute what is very clearly a prosecutable case, in part, I'm sure, because it was politically charged. And yet, they're getting blamed for it anyway. So next time, recognize that you will never derive any benefit from extending goodwill, that Republicans will always blame Democrats regardless of what happens, and so knowing that, you might as well just follow the law and hold criminals accountable for their crimes. Habba then goes on to say that Joe Biden can't do anything in office, and so he has to prosecute Trump. Again, and I've said this before, and I'll say it for as long as this bogus narrative persists, Joe Biden is not prosecuting Donald Trump. Donald Trump is being prosecuted because he, Donald Trump, a grown-ass man, made the conscious decision to falsify business records, which he knew was a crime, and therefore why he made Michael Cohen do his dirty work for him, because he wanted to hide an affair he had from the American people before the election. Which part of that was Joe Biden's fault? Was it Biden's fault that Trump cheated on his wife? Was it Biden's fault that he paid her hush money? Was it Biden's fault that he then cooked the books to hide that payment? Was it Biden's fault that he then repaid Michael Cohen enough to compensate for the taxes of that payment in order to make him whole throughout this whole scheme that was drawn out on paper? Seriously, if Joe Biden was involved in any of this, prosecute him. But considering he wasn't, maybe we just focus on the people who actually committed the crime. And second of all, Joe Biden can't do anything in office? I'll gladly take the opening here from Alina Habba. Joe Biden added 15 million jobs, including 800,000 manufacturing jobs. He brought unemployment down to its lowest point for the longest stretch in half a century. He brought the worldwide phenomenon of inflation down, and he brought wages up. He signed into law the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Law, the Gun Safety Law, the PACT Act, the CHIPS Act, codified marriage equality into federal law, removed marijuana as a Schedule I drug, and appointed over 200 federal judges to the bench. Meanwhile, what did Alina Habba's client do? He passed a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires. That's it. The guy promised a middle-class tax cut that never materialized. He promised a health care plan that never materialized. He promised an infrastructure law that never materialized. He promised a jobs boom that never materialized. Everything Donald Trump campaigned on and failed to deliver, Joe Biden has accomplished. So when Alina Habba says that Biden can't do anything in office, she might be a shitty lawyer, but she sure has mastered the art of projection. Finally, Habba claims that Biden will make a speech if Trump is convicted. First of all, I don't know where she got that information from because I didn't see any announcement about that anywhere, which might suggest that Alina Habba was lying. I know, I'm shocked to find out there's gambling going on here. But second, and more importantly, Biden should. His opponent is a criminal. He's a con man and a fraud and a sexual abuser. The American people should know that the nominee for president for Republicans may very well be a convicted felon. That seems like an absolutely appropriate thing to discuss, especially considering Joe Biden himself had nothing to do with it. Again, Biden is not Alvin Bragg, no matter how much Republicans want to manifest that idea into reality. And of course, Trump weighed in because when he doesn't get total loyalty, he feels he needs to castigate those who he views as his subjects. He wrote, "I never knew Shannon Bream was so naive. In her interview with my representative, Alina Habba, Shannon just suggested that crooked Joe Biden was not involved in my show trial. How stupid. Not only is he involved, he is virtually leading it and all of the other trials as well, meaning his people because he's not mentally sharp enough to lead anything. Just take a look at the DOJ, White House thugs involved, and everything else. Biden is incompetent and feels that weaponization is the only way he can win. He's counting on the Shannon Breams of the world to get him there. Bad day for Shannon." Again, the same tired talking points from Trump meant to pander to a base that he believes to be stupid. If Trump cared about his base, if he cared about his voters, he wouldn't lie to them on such a constant basis. He wouldn't claim that Biden is running a prosecution that is being carried out by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. He wouldn't claim that he was never informed of the charges, which is another ridiculous talking point that Trump bellowed out. Now his little mouthpieces in the media and in the GOP are running with. Quote, "I don't even know what the charges are in this rigged case. I'm entitled to specificity just like anyone else. There is no crime." Those charges would be 34 felony counts related to falsifying business records for those who aren't able to read and apparently don't even have a cursory understanding of the English language. And Trump would probably know that if he didn't spend all of his time in the courtroom sleeping. Or this newest talking point, that now the jury doesn't even need to have a unanimous verdict to convict Trump. I spoke with my Legal Breakdown co-host Glenn Kirshner about that lie, and here's what he had to say.
There was a bit of controversy that, of course, came in the form of some faux outrage from the right. I'm going to read a tweet from Fox's John Roberts, who is not to be confused with the Supreme Court Justice John Roberts, although at this point, what's the difference? So Roberts wrote, "Judge Merchan just told the jury that they do not need unanimity to convict. 4 could agree on one crime, 4 could agree on another, and another 4 on another. He said he would treat 444 as a unanimous verdict." And of course, the right, clung onto that as evidence that the rules are being rigged and that suddenly the jury verdict doesn't need to be unanimous. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Glenn, but I'm assuming that John Roberts is being purposefully disingenuous here.
So, of course, the verdict needs to be unanimous. They will need to decide whether the evidence proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump caused business records to be falsified. Here is what he's talking about. Depending on the purpose for which the business records were being falsified, was it in part to violate election laws? Was it in part to violate campaign finance laws? Was it for some other reason? They don't need to necessarily reach unanimity on all of the underlying reasons. What they do need to find beyond a reasonable doubt is all of the elements that would satisfy the crime of falsifying business records in violation of New York state law. Let me give people what I hope is a more relatable example. Brian, let's assume that you and I decide we're going to burglarize a house and we pull a third co-conspirator into our plan to burglarize. Now, let me just explain. A burglary is when you enter somebody else's house without permission with the intent to commit a crime therein. So what really matters to prove somebody guilty of a burglary beyond a reasonable doubt is the moment we cross the threshold. That's the language that's used in the law. In other words, the minute we walk through a door without permission, the minute we climb through a window without permission, intending to commit a crime inside, we've committed the crime of burglary. And we have conspired. We've agreed to commit the crime of burglary. But Brian, once we get in there, maybe, you know what, you kind of want to steal some stuff. So you start filling your bag with loot. It's an old-time word that you don't hear enough of these days. Maybe I have a personal grudge against the homeowner, so I assault the homeowner. Maybe our friend, the third member of our conspiracy, is a pyromaniac, and he decides to set fire to the house. Guess what? We have decided to commit lots of different crimes once we were in there. We may have crossed the threshold, walked through the door, thinking we're going to commit different crimes. Maybe when the three of us are caught, because I'll bet we'd make lousy criminals, and put on trial for conspiracy to burglarize, some of the jurors are like, oh, I think that they meant to rob or steal from the homeowner when they got it. Well, no, no, no. I think they really wanted to assault the homeowner. Well, no, no. I think they wanted to burn it down. So now you have a split among the jurors about what the precise underlying crime might have been. Guess what? They don't need to reach unanimity on the underlying crime. There's a similar principle at play here. It doesn't expose a legal infirmity. It actually exposes precisely how the criminal law works.
And so the right will focus solely on perpetuating disinformation because that's the only way they'll derive some benefit. You heard the expression, if you have the facts on your side, pound the facts. If you have the law on your side, pound the law. If you have neither the facts nor the law, pound the table. That's what Trump and his band of sycophants are doing right now. But it goes to show that they're not operating from a place of strength, they are operating from a place of extreme weakness. And they all know it. I've got a really exciting announcement. I've written a book. It's called Shameless. This book explores how Republicans have exploited their historical branding while attacking our democracy, how the media has proven itself a willful participant, and how Democrats can learn from this to rebalance the political scales and save our democracy. It has been a lifelong dream of mine to write my own book, and so I'd like to ask you to pre-order it by clicking the link right here on the screen. And if you buy within this pre-order period, your book is going to come with a signed nameplate. As you know, I've never had a single sponsor on my channel. I don't ask for money or anything like that, but if you're looking for a way to support me, this is hands down the best way to do it. So again, follow the link right here on the screen, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for pre-ordering Shameless. And as always, make sure to subscribe to see more of my content.